Welcome to a Roll for Crit News Roundup. You're here for a summary of everything that's gone on in the world of board games over the past month, from new games being announced to some shakeups with the people who make those games. Here it comes right now.
At the start of the month, Diamond, a distribution company that does comics but also has Alliance under their umbrella, which does many of our favorite titles and just helps distribute them, was hit with a ransomware attack. This pretty much locked up their site, making it inaccessible unless, of course, they paid a certain fee to the people, which, according to some surveys, doesn't always guarantee you get that login information back. Now, at the time of the hacking, they said by November 22nd, they should have everything up and running. And it seems right now that most of that is true. There's still some segments that are locked behind some doors. But as of now, it seems that they're back to business and hopefully being able to ship out everything during this holiday month.
Yes. We don't really know who did the hacking or exactly how bad the damage was, but it's certainly unfortunate during a time when shipping is an issue for a number of reasons. That's probably the biggest problem facing the board game industry today. So this really compounded things for Alliance, which is probably the biggest board game distributor in the US, certainly close to the top. But it's encouraging and honestly maybe even a little surprising, but I guess they have the systems in place and enough people to fix things that they were able to turn this around relatively quickly. That it sounds like, there are some hiccups, but they're more or less back on track in terms of delivery. And I don't think most retailers or consumers have really seen or felt much of an impact from it.
That said, hopefully with this and the Keyforge one, I hope that there's a bigger investment into security. It's a big deal. If a whole company gets pretty much locked out for a month, that could be a make or break, especially, of course, if it happened around a convention.
Yeah, well, it looks like things, at least for now, are back to normal, but who knows if we'll see more of these types of attacks against more distributors or publishers or who knows who in the future. You know Iello Games as the publisher of the King of Tokyo series and several other high-profile titles. They are based in France, but in fact, they also have a different distribution department in America known as Iello USA. And the reason this is news this month is because Iello of France announced that they are cutting ties with Iello USA. They will no longer be working with them, and Iello USA will not have the rights to distribute the games coming out of Iello France in North America. A lot of people like myself probably assumed that these companies were essentially the same entity, but that is in fact not the case. There was not a distinct reason given for this split. They said in their announcement that they reserved the right to perhaps elaborate more on this in the future. But by the end of this year, December 31st, 2021, that officially will end the deal. So if you are looking for any Iello games published in the US, you may have a harder time until they find some other source of distribution or something happens. So you may want to try to pick some of those games up now.
I will say this is, of course, nothing to be scared about compared to when we talked about Tasty Minstrel going pretty much out of business. Right now, this is more, it seems to be, my guess, a bunch of weird legal issues, because this is not like two companies. You said Iello USA and Iello France. I assume it's got something weird involving legality rights. And that said, I'd still keep an eye out and probably trying to get your Iello games by the end of the month just to be safe. If anything, it's already hard enough to get things with shipping issues. This is only going to complicate them.
Yeah, they do mention in the statement by name Iello USO COO Stefan Brissot, who has had his share of the controversial incidents here and there in the past. We won't go into them right now, but some people speculate that maybe it's part of the root of this has something to do with him. But again, they have not said anything yet, so all we can do is speculate and see if they do announce some kind of an elaboration on that statement in the future.
Game Workshop made a post saying that they will not tolerate any form of hate speech, symbols, and any of those kind of ilk at their tournaments. Now, this whole document and presentation was actually sparked apparently by a large Warhammer tournament in Spain, where there was a player who's wearing symbols and a nickname that either were from or heavily allude to Hitler and Nazis. Of course, some people may feel uncomfortable playing against that player, but we're told that they would have to forfeit instead of the actual player with the symbols being the one to leave the tournament. Because of this now, Games Workshop, while they did not specifically mention this incident or any other incidents, if there are any that we have not talked about, that if you see anyone like that in your tournament, you should kick them out. They don't want their money and they don't want to get involved. And I would say probably with connection to that, if your game store does not kick out someone like that or is allowing that kind of hate speech or symbols in there, you can report to the Games Workshop, who will then make sure that store cannot get Games Workshop products.
For anyone who maybe is not as familiar with Warhammer lore like we are not, this is a game that centers around a bunch of very dark, evil, corrupt armies.
They call it the grimmest of the grimdark.
Yeah, so that's sort of why this maybe is worth a little more attention, or maybe why this sort of thing has cropped up in that community, is some people may identify with these characters that are not meant to be taken really seriously in that way. And that's why Games Workshop has come out and tried to get ahead of this and say, please don't do this. Although getting ahead of it may be too strong a word, because they clearly were kind of behind it. This is a reactionary statement.
I would say, if anything, they're making it clear.
Yeah, or
at least it's something. Like I said, they didn't say the situation in particular, so it wasn't like we heard about this and we're talking about it. But like I said, for a lot of people, it's nice to be able to say now that, no, I don't think this person should be here and quit, because obviously there's a difference between a space marine who, as they say, is sort of almost a satirical of going to the extremes versus having actual symbols of people who have killed millions.
Yeah, it's a pretty big difference, and hopefully this statement it's a start. Hopefully they stick to it. Actions speak louder than words, but it would be great if going forward in different board games and miniatures communities, we didn't have to deal with this kind of thing. So if you're someone out there considering wearing hate symbols to a tournament, please don't do that anymore. We've learned that a new television game show is in the works based on a board game property. This time it's Trivial Pursuit, the classic family trivia game. And its host will be none other than Levar Burton, formerly of shows like Reading Rainbow and Star Trek The Next Generation. He was also, of course, a guest host and in the running to be one of the new hosts for the new iteration of Jeopardy! That did not pan out. So instead, it looks like he has found his footing on a different game show, Trivial Pursuit, as both host and executive producer. We do not know yet really any details about how this game will work compared to the board game itself, nor do we know what channel it's going to be airing on or exactly when it's going to be premiering. But it should be interesting to see. There have been a few board game-based game shows in the past, but I don't think any of them have been particularly successful.
Yeah, that is true. I think Trivial Pursuit has a better chance because I feel like it fits that general game show mode with trivia. I mean, Jeopardy.
It's pretty basic, yeah.
And I played the video game adaptation. Of course, they add more bells and whistles, but I think you could do that coloring and it would attract people to it. And because of the game show, the style, like if you ever played Trivial Pursuit, and I think one of the reasons these shows still do well on cable TV and in the ilk, though I could see this being on streaming, is because people watch and they're like, I know what that is. You shout at the screen. And Trivial Pursuit, I think, still gives that option.
Yeah, and it's a game that's not doesn't light up the charts on Board Game Geek or anything like that anymore.
But I think it definitely does sales well.
Yeah, sells extremely well, and it's also a trivia game. So if you like trivia games, I think it's easy to get behind, and does seem like a very natural fodder for a television show.
And of course, LeVar Burton was, at least from what I can tell, a fan favorite for Jeopardy. So I'm sure a lot of people are going to be excited to watch him here instead. There was a whole slate of new game announcements, and definitely ones we think you should keep an eye out for when they release. We're going to go through them quickly. We got Familiar Tales from Plaid Hat. This is probably one of the first new games from Plaid Hat after their breakup with Asmodee, Z-Man, and the ilk. This is a heavy storytelling game where you're going to be trying to protect a child, and your choices will show how that child grows up. Next up, we have South Trilogy. This is from Garfield Games, the same people who brought you the North series, like with Northern Sea, as well as the Western Kingdom series. This one is based around the Tigris River, so expect more of a Middle Eastern theme with that one. Then we have Ultimate Railroads. This is actually going to be a collector's edition, so to speak, on everything from the Russian Railroad series, but it will include a new expansion, Asian Railroads. We've got a new Unlock game. This Unlock actually is going to be based off of other game properties. There's one for Pandemic, one for Ticket to Ride, and one for Mysterium. We have a game called Stella that's actually in the Dixit universe. This is not just a Dixit expansion. It seems to have its own unique game mechanics. Then we have Wise Guys from Gale Force 9. This is based on the 1920s, a Prohibition era of actual gangsters like Al Capone. But when we reported out, we didn't know. Apparently, this seems to be actually a reskin of their previous game based on the Sons of Anarchy.
Yeah, it was pointed out to us on Twitter that looks like it's going to be a reskin of Sons of Anarchy, which was a TV show. So this will be Gale Force 9's first unlicensed game that they're publishing, but perhaps not an original title all to itself. But it's one of those things where they probably lost that license or just didn't want to pay for it again. And of the group, I mean, we're big Dixit fans, so Stella seems pretty intriguing. I'm curious just how different that's going to be from Dixit and how it's going to differentiate itself. And the Unlock games I just think are strange and funny that they're really cannibalizing their own properties for an escape room style game, which there's no reason they couldn't have some interesting puzzles in there. They could use those themes to good effect. So good on them for digging through their own IP vaults.
Yeah, they got quick descriptions for each one. And it's like, okay, that makes sense for that. And like the Ticket to Ride one, which is like a murder mystery or something. But I mean, one of the things I would love to see more is these titles that become more bigger and mainstream and spread into other places. I think Pandemic's probably the best target for that, just because I think it's a successful game and more likely to be made into TV shows and whatnot of that ilk. Mysterium probably could. It's actually weird. The Mysterium one just sounds like Mysterium.
Yeah, you don't need to do much to that storyline. And Familiar Tales, I mean, that one sounds awesome, from the creator of Mice and Mystics, and it's another app-based game. It's got at least some kind of app integration. The idea of like raising a kid in a fantasy world and your choices influence how they grow up and develop is very ambitious sounding stuff.
I definitely feel Familiar Tales is the one I'm most excited to try out, but that isn't saying anything with the Southern Trilogy. I loved every time of any of their games hit the table. So this just seems like a perfect fit, and also not an area that I don't think has been flooded with games for once. And, it's not another Eastern Castle or, samurai game. So I'm very excited about the theme as well.
Yeah, different kind of theme, a great pedigree, and those games are coming out over the next 3 years via Kickstarter. So they're setting you up for the long haul. So buckle in for those if you're a fan of those titles. So that's going to do it. That's all our news from the past month, or at least the big highlights. Of course, we also talked about a lot of these stories in depth with different guests on our podcast in the last month. So you can go to our website to find that if you're interested. And we'd also like to hear from you in the comments as to which of these stories sparked your interest, what your opinions are on any of these new games or any of the other topics we discussed.
Let us know in those comments down below. We'd love to hear from you. Until then, I'm Will.
I am Jonathan.
And this has been Roll for Crit.
If you liked this video, then like the video and subscribe to our channel. That would be awesome of you. We've also got a Patreon page, so we thank our Patreon supporters who also get access to some cool bonus content. If you want to see more of us, we are streaming live on Twitch and a separate YouTube channel every single week. Check that all out at rollforcrit.com/live.